that I want us to disabuse ourselves of the idea that we are running as plucky outsiders and just start to think of ourselves as a group that is going to rise to this moment and to become what the world and what this country needs in this time, which is a genuine anti-capitalist party that is capable of delivering actual electoral results and victories and taking power through the ballot, with the hopes that this party, whose aspirations are always nonviolent and whose values are always nonviolent, will give this dying empire the off-ramp that it so desperately needs, because Malcolm was not wrong when he said it's going to be the ballot or the bullet. It absolutely is. And you can see that as the billionaires and now trillionaires start to collect more and more wealth and leave people more and more dispossessed, as American empire becomes more and more ruthless in its extractions. This dying empire is going to go down one of two ways. It is either going to be ushered into an era of sanity, and in which the republic is saved as the empire collapses, or both will collapse. And it is our role to give people an alternative at the ballot box, because as Malcolm and so many others, as Marc pointed out on the way in, these two parties are both capitalist parties. They're both imperialist parties. They are not going to provide us with any solutions in this moment. So then what do we do? In order to take the lead in this moment, I'm going to humbly propose my own view and my campaign's view of the intervention that I think that we can collectively make. And that's going to require me describing the intervention that I'm seeking to make in the state of California and the role that I see it playing in our overall movement as Greens towards liberation. And that begins with some reflections from another Black liberation figure, the great Stokely Carmichael, later Kwame Ture. Stokely Carmichael was a member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. It should be noted that both Malcolm and following Malcolm's lead, Stokely Carmichael took strongly anti-Zionist positions as early as 1963, 1964, 1965. They understood the interconnection between oppression here inside the United States and imperialist oppression abroad, and that caused them to stand for Palestinian liberation the same way that this party has stood for Palestinian liberation and reparations in the same moment and in the same breath. So Kwame Ture, for me, he was somebody that reflected deeply on Malcolm's insights about how to effectively organize politically, and he crystallized some of those teachings. So the first one, and really this is the one that I'm going to focus the rest of my comments around for the next 10 to 12 minutes and then open things up to questions, is that Kwame Ture said revolutionaries don't just mobilize around issues, revolutionaries organize against systems. I'm going to just repeat that. Revolutionaries don't just mobilize around issues, revolutionaries organize against systems. So when I was called into taking on an electoral mandate, I had to start to reflect on how we could use a revolutionary political party as a tool to move people from mobilization around issues: environmental sanity, police brutality, Palestinian liberation, ICE abolition. I'm going to name a few more over the next few minutes about how we could move a lot of the energy that right now is rooted in mobilization around specific issues into actual organization against the systems that are productive of each of those issues. Let me explain what I mean by that. After I started to wake up politically at age 15, one of the first things that I did was march against police brutality in my own community. I was living on the south side of Minneapolis at that time, and there was a kid in our neighborhood that got shot and killed in his own backyard playing with a water gun. Okay. And in 1988, when we went out and marched, it was a few dozen of us, and almost everybody in that audience, everybody in that crowd, everybody in that public was Black. In 2020, the George Floyd uprisings brought into being the largest mass mobilizations ever against police brutality against Black people, correct? Had you guys ever seen so many people mobilized around this core issue? I never, as a 15-year-old kid, imagined that I would see white folks outnumbering Black folks 5-1 at an anti-police brutality protest. Never imagined that I would see Latino Americans outnumbering Black folks 3-1. And that's if I'm including Afro-Latinos in both categories. It was beautiful and it was heartening and it was empowering. And we saw our people and we mobilized on what had previously been an impossible scale, but it was mobilization around the issue rather than organization against the system that was producing the police violence. So despite the fact that the mobilization was of massive scale and was indeed worldwide, we saw mass mobilizations in Paris and in Palestine and across the globe. But despite the fact that these mobilizations were exponentially larger than anything that we had previously experienced, they were not effective organization against the system. What's the difference? Kwame Ture said mobilization is temporary and ephemeral. Organization is permanent and durable. It is repeatable. It is not an episodic stance for justice. It is an institutional and structural one. He said it's easy to get the unconscious, as he calls them. The word is a little harsh, but the unconscious, as he calls them, to mobilize against an injustice because people have an innate sense of justice. But it is difficult to get them to take routine patterned action in order to resist. It's difficult to channel them from mobilization, which is episodic, into organization, which is durable. Are you starting to understand what the potential role of an actual revolutionary political party might be in this moment? So what happens when the mobilization does not become organization? Then Team Blue, which has to cosplay as an opposition party because its electoral base is largely people of color, takes power, and police kill more people in every year since the greatest mass mobilizations against police brutality. It would appear to be a paradoxical result unless and until you understand the distinction between mobilization and organization. We are now sitting at a point where police have killed more people in every year since George Floyd was choked out over 8 minutes and 46 excruciating seconds than in any year previous to that. It's disgusting. 1 in 3 stranger homicides in the United States of America is when a police officer kills a civilian. And we now see cop cities that were, built in Democrat-controlled cities, Democrat-controlled states, the escalation of massive repressive police forces on a bipartisan basis. Let's go to 2023. In October of 2023, a lot of people who were not taught by Black revolutionaries to understand Zionism as an ethnic variant of white supremacy, as a regional variant of white supremacy, were just waking up to what Zionism really is in October 2023. They're waking up to the reality that the same settler colonialism which genocided Native American and indigenous populations in the Western Hemisphere, this is exactly the way that it looked because this is exactly what it is. Settler colonialism doesn't change tactics, it just changes venues. It always slaughters women and children. It always proceeds in ruthless ways to demonize and dehumanize anyone who would resist. So a bunch of people, for the first time, mobilized on a mass basis for not just ceasefire, but for Palestinian liberation, for the end of apartheid. And we have seen in these past 2 years, the greatest mass mobilizations for Palestinian liberation that have ever taken place in human history. Palestinians outnumbered sometimes 100-1 in these mass mobilizations. And for those of us that knew what Zionism was as early as the 1980s, and when we were protesting against various particular incidents of Zionist violence or Israeli expansion, the only people in those crowds back then would be Palestinian Americans, a few Muslim Americans, some Black revolutionaries, and a handful of hardcore communists. And that was the group. These were small gatherings and, small protests. Now we have mass mobilization. But 2 years of mass mobilization has not been able to procure the result. It has not actually ended the ongoing genocide. Even the so-called ceasefire has not ended the ongoing genocide that takes place in Gaza. And those of us that study and write about the history of imperialism understand why. We know that ceasefires are often used as strategic tools in ongoing projects of settler colonialism. They're used for public relations purposes. They're used to reload and rearm. They're used to delegitimize resistance. They serve all kinds of purposes, but it is not at all unusual for ceasefires to be declared as part of an overall strategy of settler colonial expansion. So we've seen mass mobilization, bigger crowds than any of us ever imagined we would see for Palestinian liberation. But once again, not organization against the system which is producing the outcome, just mobilization around the specific issue. More from the Black liberation tradition on how to understand and to present something that Greens are uniquely positioned to speak with authority on. And that is the imperial boomerang. This idea first put forward by the great Caribbean intellectual Aimé Césaire, then made popular by his close friend and intellectual interlocutor, Frantz Fanon, the idea that whatever the empire does to its colonized subjects abroad will eventually boomerang back on the metropolitan population and become the very instruments of exploitation and oppression that are used to keep the imperial core oppressed. Césaire said that fascism was simply European whites doing to one another what they had done to the colonized world for a century. And he wasn't wrong. He wasn't wrong. And Greens, in our tethering together of the people and the peace, standing for individual rights, standing against fascism, and standing against war and imperialism, we are uniquely positioned to offer the most thoroughgoing, substantive critique of the interconnection between those two faces of imperial fascism. The same boot, the same knee that is choking Palestinians is the same one that's on George Floyd's neck. There's a direct organic interconnection, and we don't have to reach for it or stretch for it. It is there in our approach and in our understanding. On to the third example, ICE abolition and the struggle for immigrant rights, the struggle to preserve basic civil liberties in a democratic society. We have seen since Trump took power in January, the greatest mass mobilizations against, listen, some of us that happen to be Muslim tried to warn people about ICE in 2001 because we saw the creation of this Gestapo taking place in real time, and it was based on a demonization of Muslim communities and the portrayal of all Muslims as terrorists. And we said, listen, there's going to come a day where you guys are going to have this, offloading of your civil liberties onto a security state come back and bite you. Well, we are here in that moment now. And we have seen the most large-scale mass mobilizations against that Gestapo police state since Trump took office. Now, there are some parts of this that are just about optics. Let's be clear. Obama's still the deporter in chief, and Trump is still chasing Obama's deportation records. which goes back to the point that Marc, brought me in on. Do not think of these as separate and distinct parties. Think of this as a single capitalist imperialist party that has competing factions inside of it, one blue, one red. But if you were to make a Venn diagram of the donor base of those two parties, you would be staring at a single circle with APAC in the middle of it, with Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, General Dynamics, Northrop Grumman, with the war machine and the imperial machine right at the heart of the funding structure for both of those parties. It's just that the optics and the theatrics of power with respect to immigrant communities differs between Team Blue and Team Red. Team Red throws meat to their base by upplaying and dramatizing the theatrics of white supremacist power, whereas Team Blue has to hide them, has to pretend that they are there to defend communities of color, even when they create the very infrastructure that fascists, open fascists, are going to exploit for the sheer joy and perversion of putting those people in their place. Despite the darkness of this moment, we have seen mass mobilization. We have seen people standing for and with immigrant communities of all colors, but especially for Mexican American immigrants. And despite the fact that we have seen the greatest mass mobilizations, we have to this point proven incapable of actually beating back the rise. And the reason for that is simple. The reason for that is straightforward, is that these remain mobilizations around the specific issue rather than organization against the system, which is productive of the issues. I told you that Malcolm said, we're not outnumbered, we're out-organized. I told you that Kwame Ture said, revolutionaries don't just mobilize around issues, revolutionaries organize against systems. I say that the role of a revolutionary political party is that it channels the people's energies from mobilization around the specific issues that face respective communities into organization against the systems that produce the oppression of all. It means that we're no longer mobilizing around trans rights in a silo. It means we're no longer mobilizing around LGBTQ rights in a silo, or immigrant rights in a silo, or police brutality in a silo, or Palestinian liberation in a silo. We are understanding and presenting to the public the structural relationship between all of these forms, and positing simply and in a straightforward way that simply protesting these forms of oppression will produce no outcome. And I know that this is going to be a hard one for people to hear and for people to sit with, but Kwame Ture said the problem with nonviolent protest is that it is predicated on your enemy having a conscience, and America has none. The way that I put it is that you cannot make a moral appeal to oppressors, because if they had morality, they wouldn't be oppressors. You have to organize to fight them. And as Greens, we always prefer, and frankly, and I see Sister Halima on the screen, Salaam Alaikum, as a practicing Muslim, we always prefer a peaceful solution to an armed one. In every instance, we have to be the group that offers the opportunity for liberation to be taken at the ballot box so that it does not need to be taken with the bullet. Because that is what it's going to come down to if we continue in this fascist death spiral. The knives and the guns and the bricks and the clubs will come out. They are already coming out. So what does it mean then to fight in this moment? It means to contest for power. It means to build the institutional strength that is no longer making a moral appeal of authorities for them to do what needs to be done. It is becoming the authority so that we can do what needs to be done. And the fact that we don't take corporate money, the fact that we don't take special interest and PAC money puts us in a position where we can actually be responsive to and responsible to the people writ large. The fact that we are not embedded in a fake culture war that Team Blue and Team Red have to stage against one another in order to distract people from the fact that both parties are gutting our civil liberties and taking every penny that they can out of our pockets and pouring them into an endless war machine. We are uniquely positioned outside of that system, as Malcolm said, not Democrat, not Republican, but independent of that system. And we are sitting in a moment where there is broad dissatisfaction with both of the corporate capitalist imperialist parties. We are not going to find a better time to strike than this. 63% of American voters say that both of these parties do such a, quote, poor job, that's the language of the specific poll, that we need a third party. That number goes to 70% when it's independents. It goes to 53% when it's registered Democrats. It goes to 48% when it's registered Republicans. And to this day, Pew Research has indicated that across the American electorate, 40% of people still identify themselves as politically independent. Only 30% of people identify themselves with the Democrats, 25% with the Republicans. People are actually still more politically independent, but you would never know it because the same corporate funders that own the political parties own the media outlets as well, and they now own the social media outlets too. So they are involved in producing this narrative. Never let the man that you are against form your opinions for you. Never let your enemy tell you how many of you there are. We are actually positioned to win. And here's how we do it in the state of California, which I am going to ask everybody in this room to support this campaign in whatever way that they can, with their moral resources, spiritual resources, financial resources, political resources, because the reason why I chose to run for governor in the state of California was because I see a path to victory in the state of California, which deals a death blow to the duopoly. If we are able to turn the governor's mansion green, then the Democrats are going the way of the Whigs. That is the end of that party. And the worst part about it is that they know it. So here's the humble case and the path to success. They have rigged this system in order to try to produce an easily repeatable outcome for that Julius Nyerere monoparty, for that single party state, for the duopoly, for the purple fascists, for Team Blue and Red together. And that is, they've created a jungle primary in the state of California where only the top two candidates advance, irrespective of party. And that is designed in order to produce one blue versus one red and wash, rinse, repeat. And it keeps moving forward in that way, except that can actually backfire in a state like California, which leans so far left. Yes, mostly liberal, and I'll just say that right off the top, but also significant numbers of progressives, significant number of actual socialists, significant numbers of eco-socialists, all kinds of people on the left end of the political spectrum. There are more registered independents in the state of California than there are registered Republicans. I repeat, there are more registered independents in the state of California than there are registered Republicans. Which means that in a jungle primary environment, we actually have a very good chance of getting to second place, to creating a one-on-one matchup between a blue candidate and a green candidate present. Oh, and by the way, I came out with my, hold on, let's see. All right, we, we got baseball jerseys, basketball jerseys. We got all of the above. So and the way that this can unfold for us, if we are capable of responding to the political moment in which we are embedded, is as follows. The second place finisher in the California gubernatorial primary, since they initiated this jungle primary system, has gotten between 15 and 21% of the vote in all instances. It's actually a tiny number. Usually that number is about 17% of the vote, 18% of the vote will get you to second place in the primary, okay? We're not talking about having to get 50% of the vote. We're not talking about having to get 40% of the vote, although we know that Greens can, in important and significant elections, put up those numbers. Matt Gonzalez got 47% of the vote against Gavin Newsom running for mayor of San Francisco in 2003. 47% of the vote, despite the fact that he was outspent 20-1 in the city of San Francisco. We almost ended Lil Gavin's career before he ever got started. And wouldn't that have been a boon for humanity? And Matt was a great candidate, but Matt had not been on the Breakfast Club. And Matt had not gotten 1 million votes for the White House when he started his campaign in San Francisco. We're running with a campaign that has more than average national visibility for a Green campaign. So the idea of getting to 17 or 18% is not a far-fetched idea. Only 5.5 million people voted in that primary because they hide it in June, where they're not expecting people to come out to vote. But the thing about, and so they're counting on low voter turnout to continue that inertial momentum of the duopoly and just keep bringing you one blue versus one red. Well, what if we are able to do what Greens have not done, which is to successfully build a ground game, voter infrastructure in every single county of the state so that we get committed communities to turn on that date? I'll just give you one simple example. There are 1 million Muslims in the state of California, according to most census data. Not all of them are registered voters. Not all of them are eligible to vote. The numbers vary between 400, 600,000 on those lines. But 53% of American Muslims nationwide voted for the Steinware ticket in 2024 if we were just simply able to get the voters that voted for me already in the state of California to all show up on June 2nd, 2026, then we are actually a stone's throw away from getting to that 17%, that 18%, that 20%. It is going to take about 1.3, 1.4 million votes in the state of California on June 2nd, 2026, 6226. Now, what will happen if we are able, when we are able to position ourselves in that way? One blue versus one green. Their lesser of two evils argument is off of the table now. There is no scenario in which you are putting a Republican in power. So what cards do they have to play? Their ordinary cards that they play are to keep media coverage off of any Green so that no one ever hears. But they've already failed in that because I've been participating in all of the major governor candidates forum because it is very difficult for them to keep a person who got 890,000 votes for the White House off of a debate stage against candidates who have never received that many votes in a national election. And every single time I've competed in one of those open candidate forums, it has been a bloodbath. At the SEIU Local 1000, with 7 Democrat candidates, the billionaire Democrat got up and walked off of stage. He was so butthurt about me destroying the billionaire class and its relationship to the Democrats that he literally got up and walked out after I spoke. And then when they closed the doors after 3.5 hours and took an open vote of the SEIU membership, 1,000 people in that room, with it also streaming to multiple SEIU chapters around the state, the votes, I won best candidate hands down. The people that were in the room said that 10 minutes into the conversation, SEIU leadership said, "We get it. Butch won the debate. Is there anything else you want us to know about the candidates?" It's that bad. So what's going to happen when it is a blue versus me? When it's Katie Porter against Katie, I stand with Israel Porter against me. And the media cannot make it go away between June and November. I'm going to beat the brakes off of them the same way that Zoran beat the brakes off of the Democratic establishment, but I will not be beholden to the Democratic establishment the way that Zoran is. I will be beholden to you and to the people. And if we are able to inflict that kind of damage to a core space inside the Democratic fiefdom, frankly, because they are basically just feudal lords of the state of California at this point, extracting rents and doing whatever they want with the proceeds, then it is going to create the circumstances nationwide that is going to allow the Green Party to assume that position of genuine opposition. Because the argument that they make is always, oh, but you can't win. Oh, but you're spoilers. And all it will take is a win. And I know that it can happen because I was living in Minneapolis the last time an independent gubernatorial candidate broke the duopoly. It was when Jesse Ventura beat both parties. It is absolutely within our reach. It is absolutely within our grasp. And once it happens, then you are going to see actual progressives fleeing from the Democrats, and you will also see a lot of populists who don't see a difference between blue criminals and red criminals, and all other things being equal would rather pay lower taxes, so they call themselves Republicans for the moment, but you will see them fleeing and joining this green wave. So what I'm humbly suggesting to you guys is that we are the party in this moment, and we need to start acting like it. And that we should set the pace in this race to see who is going to emerge as the true opposition party. And we have a structural advantage in this. In the last electoral cycle nationally, we were able to, even with the Democrats' best efforts to sue us off of as many ballots as they could, you could still vote green in, I think, 46 states when it finally came down to it. Some of those you had to write in, but we were on the ballot, I think, in 41 of them. Just for context, if you were to try to create a new political party and secure the ballot access that the Greens have steadfastly built over the past 4 decades, if you were trying to just get the signatures and petitions that would be required to get you on the ballot in all of those states, it might cost you $80 million right now. It might cost a little more than that. We have that. We have the reach. The other pretenders, PSL, for example, is on the ballot in like 12 or 13 states. They had to do different kind of alliances just to get on the ballot in other spaces. There is no other party that is ready to step up and become the genuine opposition party, and there is none that has the track record or the capacious understanding of politics. We're not holding people to ideological purity tests and making them swear on a copy of Marx's Capital before they come in and become activists and organizers inside this party. So this is our moment. This is our time. And I'm asking you guys to help me build this weapon of war. Ballot of the bullet. I'm just going to be honest with you. It has to be a weapon of war inside the state of California, because if we are able to successfully break the duopoly here, then Greens win everything from here on in. Last part, and this is the aspirational piece that I want people to reflect on. is that once Team Blue is out of the way, fascism is actually dead. And the reason is that culture war that Team Blue has to carry out in order to mask its capitalist and imperialist roots. Once that's gone, the coalitions that we can build against those hard right fascist conservatives outnumber that core constituency 4-1, 5-1. When the Democrats are no longer in the way, fascism is no longer going to be a risk. And we have an opportunity to deliver, I'm not going to say to deliver the republic back to the people. This republic didn't ever belong to people like me. We have an opportunity to deliver this republic to all of its people for the first time in its history.
Amen. Thank you so much, Dr. Ware. And let me highlight a couple of things that Dr. Ware said. I put in the chat links to donate to his campaign. It's butchware4gov.com, the number 4, butchware4gov.com. If you have some money to donate, please hop in and donate. If you've got some time to volunteer for his campaign, do phone banking, text banking, please hop on into the volunteer link and volunteer. But also engage in some relational organizing. If you know people in California, if you have family or friends in California, nothing is better than personal calls or personal texts, and reach out to those people you know and ask them to get engaged. And the last thing, and then I would want to open it up for some questions for Dr. Ware, but the last thing is, as he said, we need to organize against systems, not just mobilize around issues. And that means getting involved in regular, sustained work, right? So if you have not been to your local meeting lately, please get out to your local meeting. If you have not been active, if you just show up once a year or subscribe to newsletters, it's not enough. It's not enough. We need your money, sure, but we need you. We need your action. We need your participation. We need you to be on the streets, on the ground, in the meetings, doing the work to help us build this party. So please, if you haven't been active lately, now is the time to get involved. I went through and muted people as there were some distracting noises occasionally, but if you have a question for Dr. Ware, please, raise your hand and we'll ask you to unmute. I just want people to have a chance to ask Dr. Ware some questions. I saw some great ones in the chat there. I see Mike, followed by Starlene. Mike, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Dr. Ware, great presentation. I love it. I love the comprehensive worldview. Both Greens in Washington State and California suffer from the jungle primary system. But what's worse in California is that it has raised the cost to get onto the ballot. And what has happened is that we have shrunk down to only running for statewide offices because limited resources end up going into candidates who will run statewide and reach all voters. I think I'm running for Secretary of State. We got a couple other statewide candidates. My question for you is on the campaign trail. Have you found anybody who's open to running down ticket for state legislature or Congress? Because we need to have a team running with you. Over.
Yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity. There's only so much that I can cover in a presentation. I played it came from a team sports background, and so I tend to process things through sports metaphors. Michael Jordan was not winning any championships until Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant came along. It didn't matter how good Michael Jordan was. And, I might think of myself as a Michael Jordan, but I'm not winning any championships without good teammates. So I've actually been recruiting candidates for state legislature throughout the process. We're up to, I think, now 8 that have formally agreed to do this, and we're going to try to put together a slate of state legislatures. I'm aiming for 20 that we can get declared by, I think, March 3rd or somewhere thereabouts. It's in early March is the deadline for declaring state legislature candidates. And the reason is that I'm trying to think about how we are going to effectively govern, not just how we're going to win elections. So I know that Jesse Ventura was actually able to very effectively govern, because paradoxically, when an outsider is in an executive position, the competing blue and red legislators are actually incentivized for cooperation because they're not banging on each other. Right? So there's actually a lot that you could get done even with no friends, but there's only so much that you can get done with no friends. And having between 12 and 20 state legislators who can be part of specific coalitions in order to get particular things passed in what can potentially be hostile environments is crucial. So that was one of the first things that I've been looking for. And we've also got a couple of candidates who are pondering congressional runs, also some very well positioned local activists in specific communities who have very, very strong followings in their particular districts. I'm not going to name names because I don't want to put people on the spot who have not made formal commitments, but I fully agree with and anticipate and have anticipated Mike's concern and have been trying to grow a roster throughout the process.
Thank you, Butch. Starlene, you're in stack next.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Oh my gosh, Dr. Ware, that was totally amazing. And thank you so much for being here and for that talk you gave to us. So I'm the chair of the Green Congressional Campaign Committee, and our main goal is to help get Greens elected to Congress. And right now, we're working on a common platform with a few candidates, including one of yours in the Santa Cruz area. We're writing out a document with this common platform that would be, shared by all the congressional candidates around the country, hopefully. And I was wondering if you might be willing to take a look at it and maybe give us some feedbacks and suggestions.
Absolutely. What I would say is that if you could send it to Jason, just you, the manager at forgov.com, would love to be part of that conversation. I think that it's really critical that that we keep the decentralized organizational structure and spirit of the Greens. I think representative democracy is rooted in that, and at the same time, I think we need a little more coordinated messaging and coordinated action than we've had in the past.
Oh, yeah.
So you will always find me being a good teammate on those kind of questions, and whatever ways that the campaign can contribute resources, to developing that, we're happy to do it.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm in a rehab center right now working on some health issues, but I did want to turn my camera on.
Sending you my very best prayers. It's nice to see you. Thank you.
Bless you. And I know Jason. I worked on his campaign here in Washington, so I'll be in touch with him. Thanks so much.
Great. Halima, you're in stack next.
Yes, that was really great discussion. Thank you for all the wisdom you've imparted today. My question is around the question of organizing versus mobilizing. I think that when you said that we're not effective at organizing, I would say also that goes hand in hand with mobilizing. And I feel as though, in my opinion, it's both.
Yep.
How would you say we should start? Like if we're at ground zero, we're saying, what we've done in the past is not effective. We're now at ground zero. How do we start? What would your answer be?
So thank you for the question. I always have to be careful to phrase things right, because I make a very strong case, but there's a word in my formulation that needs to be a load-bearing word. Revolutionaries don't just mobilize around issues. Revolutionaries organize against systems. It's not meant to be an either or. It's meant to be that mobilization is necessary but not sufficient, right? That it is something something that is required, but it does not go far enough. And the reason is that mobilization, and under ideal circumstances, is the first step towards organization. And mobilization around the issues that people are most passionate about and that are most directly connected to their lived experiences, that's where you can connect people and then channel them into effective organization against the broader structures. That is the work of political education. That is the work of building social networks and social bonds. So it always starts with like reaching communities where they're at and connecting on the issue that is of most importance to them, and then allowing that to open onto an organization against the system that's productive of it. In my very short, it's now like a year in electoral politics, my very short career in electoral politics, I saw this happen in the 11 weeks that I was on the Stein Ware campaign with the Muslim community. Specifically, when I joined the campaign, we were polling at about 10 or 12% in the Muslim community. And Kamala was still at like 40% in the Muslim community. And on election day, we got 53% of the vote, 20% voted for Team Blue Genocide, 20% voted for Team Red Fascism. And the way that that happened is that we had effective messaging and face-to-face interaction and community building on the issue that was of most importance to the Muslim community broadly, which was the genocide in Gaza. And on the basis of intervening on that specific issue, then that opened people to wanting to participate in organizing for electoral politics. And you've seen this, Halima, I'm sure that we've seen so many more Muslims now associating with green activism than we ever saw at any point in the past. So this is an opportunity, and for the campaign specifically, on ICE abolition, to do targeted messaging and organization infrastructure building with the activists that are resisting on the ground, with those groups that are doing rapid response. So it's finding people where they're at, getting people that are engaged around mobilization for specific issues, and then saying, and this is what I'm saying over and over again, is that a political party, a revolutionary political party, its job is to put itself in the hands of the people that are doing the liberation work on the ground. So I'm saying to those activists that are doing the work of rapid response in Santa Ana or in LA County, that this is your party now if you want it, right? This is your vehicle to have a political infrastructure behind you in everything that you're doing, because we see the connection between environmental sanity and environmental justice and the rise of the police state. This is your party. And it's the same thing when I was going and literally doing workouts with former street organization leaders. These were basically all Pyrus and Brims and Crips from the broader San Diego area that are now doing like anti-violence intervention works in their community. And I'm saying, listen, this is your party. If you want a party that is committed to fundamental transformation of the carceral state and the way that it engages Black communities, right? If you are an abolitionist, this is your party now too. So it's not an either or. It really is meeting people where they're at and participating in those mobilizations, but not letting those be the end of people's engagement, rather trying as much as possible to invite people into that collective action, into the organizational work. And you're not going to get all of them. It's always going to be more people that will, to be honest, to be clear about this, a lot of people will hear a noise and run to go see what it is. And that's how they ended up at the protest, right? They're just kind of responding to whatever they see is going on. But you are going to be able to, if you have this approach of essentially proselytizing for a political movement in these mobilizations, of pulling a lot of people into the action by making the case that if you really want to intervene successfully on that issue, then help us build the power that is going to be required to break the people whose foot is on your neck. Yeah, no kings. Oh my God, somebody type no kings into the chat. I mean, how do you have 7 million, 8 million people literally marching where the cops tell them to march and making no demands? like no kings, no demands. It's controlled opposition at its finest. And what we need to be doing, and so we sent in the campaign, we sent people out to flyer at those No Kings events, right? Because there's a lot of people that they want to do something, and this is an opportunity to say, well, if you want to do more than just show up and buy merch, if you want to actually fight against the problem, then consider working with us.
Amen. Yeah, 100%. Malik, you're in the stack next for a question for Dr. Ware.
Hello.
Question. I was just going to point to Carrie's comment, and good to see you, Carrie. Carrie's point on mobilization in the chat is very, very nice. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Hello. What's the best way to actually combat the institution?
The best way to combat the institution is to take them out of power. It is to beat them. And this also goes back to the kind of Black liberation tradition, and when I was assessing how to intervene. So I told you what Malcolm said. I didn't mention that Huey P. Newton ran for Congress not once but twice, that Bobby Seale ran for mayor of Oakland, that Kwame Ture said that voting every 4 years is the height of bourgeois hypocrisy, but I would shed my blood for the vote, and I have, because I know that the vote is how I can organize my people. So why am I citing that in this moment? I actually believe, as the Panthers did, that mutual aid and direct action are the more important pieces of movement work. However, an electoral political intervention articulates with movement action, mutual aid, and direct action in ways that amplify it if you do that strategically. So the short version is, I'm somebody that comes from an organizing and community building background. Like, most of my work was in the Black community, in the Muslim community, and especially in the Black Muslim community for 20 plus years. And the way that I just explained this is that wouldn't our community building and organizing work on the ground be more fruitful if we had people in power who were not shoveling shit down onto the people that we're trying to serve through mutual aid? Because right now, our mutual aid is mostly just shoveling dung off of people who have elected officials that keep heaping it onto them. And that if we are just able to put a few people in positions of decision-making and authority, where even if they don't provide any benefit, if they just desist from the harm, then all of the work that people are doing to build community can then flourish and prosper. Then we can think about maximizing human potential rather than just meeting basic needs. So the idea that is a relatively straightforward one. If you don't want your elected officials to constantly kowtow to Israel, elect an anti-Zionist. And then you won't have to worry about that person being beholden to the Israeli lobby. If you want to not have your tax dollars be endlessly poured into forever war or into the private prison industry, elect an anti-war candidate or an abolitionist candidate. I'm both, right? So that the idea is to just, by targeting specific places where we can just desist from the harm and provide benefit instead, that's going to maximize the impact that we can have.
Thank you, sir. Colin, you're in the stack next. I'm curious to see if you have picked the question I was going to pick for you from your list.
We'll see. Yeah, I really appreciate the way that you've articulated, like, the niche that we can fill within this larger sort of leftist movement, the what we have to give. But I'm interested, like, we are, especially in Washington State, we're a settler majority, like disproportionately elder party. We're often associated with the middle class, whether or not that's true. And if we're trying to work with and engage the communities that are actually going to be, beholden to and create the revolution that we need, working class communities, youth communities, Afro-diasporic communities, indigenous and immigrants communities, like, how do we work with those groups without trying to like co-opt those groups, without the either the appearance or the reality of taking what other groups are doing and then claiming credit for it, or redirect or recreating the work that they're already doing. Like, what does that that outreach look like?
How do we not become, you know, PSL and essentially become
basically
become ambulance chasers seeking you know, photo ops and appropriating the power of work that's being done on the ground. So this was actually the very first address that I gave to the Green Party National Steering Committee after the presidential election. I think that it might have still been late November or early December when I gave that address. I know Margaret was there and a few others, where I basically listed the places where the Green Party needs to grow. And the first was we need to stop playing just to be on the field and start playing to win. But the last one, and the one that's most germane to your point here, is that there needs to be a demographic transformation of the Green Party. So part of my theorizing of showing up in service and laying the tools of the party at the feet of the people that are doing the work on the ground is that removes that dynamic where you're showing up and appropriating the organizing work that people have been doing for your own electoral purposes. The theory of the case is I'm going to give this party to you. And that means you have to open your structures to the people that are doing the work on the ground. And you need to be recruiting a more diverse group than the Greens have ever had, because this is, for better or for worse, understood to be like an aging group of middle-class white leftists. And that's not wrong with respect to the leadership of a lot of Green Party chapters in a lot of places around the country, and all of the places where we went during the campaign. And I was in 70 cities in 70 days, right? We were all over the place. In all of those places where those local leadership and those individual chapters, whether it's state or local, when they were the people that were open to, you know, more Muslim representation, more Black and brown representation, more queer representation, and so forth, those are the people that I preserve relationships with. And the ones that were fighting that, I treat them like a barren patch in the field and I farm around them. That's that in the end, like we have to understand there are some people in any party, in any organization, that are, you know, going to be territorial with turf and all kinds of, you know, other issues. And we do not have time to be wasting time on people that are going to be fighting against an inevitable change that is going to be needed for this party to become what it become. So all of those people like you, Colin, who perceive the nature of the problem and who are ready to take action in order to like make this a more inviting and welcoming space for all kinds of marginalized and oppressed communities, you're the person that has to show up as an interlocutor, and not in a place where I'm saying I'm going to ventriloquize the concerns that you have and speak them. It's more like, here, take the mic, right? Tell the people what you need. And so usually the way that I'm phrasing it is, how can we best show up in service to the community that you are already building and working for? I see Carrie popping up on the screen. Carrie's one of the people that we've had conversations about potentially running for office, representing predominantly rural farm communities. That goes just as much for white rural farmers as it goes for other oppressed and marginalized communities. If you show up and say, how can I best be of service to your community, then that's very different than saying, hey, you guys have this concern, this is my platform, come vote for me. So for me, that's what it is. It's a disposition and an ethic and a practical reality of showing up in service and turning the party into a mouthpiece that amplifies the work that's being already done on the ground, and that reinforces it, and that serves as a force multiplier by bringing together liberation-minded communities and creating a single conversation that is about collective empowerment, organizing against the system, rather than just the issue that might be of most direct concern for those specific activists or organizers. Yeah, Colin put, yes, the Green Party needs to actually be a party made by the people, not claim the role of the People's Party. This is so crucial, and I'm sorry to be long-winded, but I said this in that first meeting. I said, The Green Party is the party that has the best Black liberation platform, but it's not a Black people's party. It is the party that has the best working class agenda, but it's not a working people's party right now. It has the best program for Latino communities and for protection of immigrant rights more broadly, but that is not the constitution of this party. So we have to do the work of bringing the party to those people.
Great, fantastic. Joy, you're next in the stack. Oops, Joy, you just muted yourself. No, came off for a second and then went right back on mute.
Okay, are we there? Thank you, Dr. Ware, and we really appreciate you speaking with us today. I just had a couple quick questions. One is, how do you motivate people that are just politically shut down, and how do we bring them to the Green Party? And that's the second part of that is, how do you get the people that are the blue no matter who people and get them out of that mindset and get them over to us and let them know that that's just dead. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I'll go in reverse order.
Okay.
So, and I'm sorry if this is going to come off the wrong way, but do not bother with the vote blue no matter who people.
Okay.
Do not try to persuade them. Because you're essentially trying to deprogram cult members at that point. And it's actually been my experience that it is easier to recruit Republicans than it is to recruit Blue MAGA. Because there's a kind of moral argument embedded in liberalism that causes them to see themselves as the good guys in every interaction, no matter what. And therefore, if you are against them, you are actually aligned with the forces of evil. They conceive of a factional dispute between two halves of a capitalist ruling class as the actual battle between good and evil. And therefore, it is very, very difficult to deprogram them from that. The good news is that we don't need them, right? We do not need vote blue no matter who. We do not need Blue MAGA in order to get to 20% on June 2nd, 2026. And that's actually part of the electoral dynamics that I see as unfolding after that. A lot of traditional Republican voters are going to see me banging on the Democrats and love it, because I already got contacted by a lot of those people just through the presidential campaign and right down to the president. Once the lesser of two evils argument is off the table and it's just a green versus a blue, then we can make headway on some of those vote blue no matter who. And the short version of the argument, the kernel of it, is essentially, listen, maybe you don't think that I can win. Maybe you think that Greens can never win, but which thing would you rather have? A Republican candidate pulling your party towards the right, or a leftist candidate pulling your party towards the left? Right? There's going to be a lot of those milder version of vote blue no matter who people who are going to actually be approachable at various stages of the process, just because we can make a case that by taking our candidacy seriously, you're going to push the Democrats to the left. Now, we all know that the Democrats cannot be pushed to the left, but they don't know that, and that's fine. We can still make the case in their world for this part. Now to the first one. My wife said this to me on the way to an event that we did in Sacramento. And the thing to know about my Sacramento, so we've got field teams now everywhere in the state. And I've been everywhere from San Diego to Humboldt, right? We've been up and down the state, Bakersfield, Fresno, Central, wherever. We've been everywhere since February. My wife, and the thing to know about our Sacramento team is that our Sacramento team is a lot of anarchists, actually. And if you can get anarchists to do electoral organizing work for you, you're onto something. And so we're going to like midnight tea with some anarchists in Sacramento. And my wife says to me on the way in, she's like, she said, your superpower is that you can convince people who don't believe in voting to vote. And I said, yeah, because I don't believe in it any more than they do. I voted in presidential elections before I ran for vice president exactly twice. I voted for Bill Clinton when I was 18, and I voted for Obama the first time. He did not get me the second time. That was it. That was the list. So the reason is that I don't actually believe that we need to make the appeal that electoral politics is the solution. I think that we need to make the appeal that electoral politics is part of the praxis of collective liberation. And if you don't like it coming from me, then you have to listen to Malcolm. That's where I started with the ballot of the bullet. If you don't like it from me, then you got to take it from Huey P. Newton. If you don't like it from me, you can take it from Kwame Ture, right? These are people with better revolutionary pedigree than mine who believe in using targeted electoral interventions as part of a collective liberation strategy. So I think that's how I am usually making the case to the kind of hardcore detached folks. Now there's another group, and this is the people, and these are much easier to appeal to. These are the people that have never had any motivation to vote because they don't believe in either of those two crooked parties. And usually what people are responding to in the way that I'm messaging is that I'm not messaging. I'm just spitting the truth the way that I understand it. I'm not doing this as a politician. I'm just telling you the way that I see the situation. And we have a great anti-establishment lane that we can run in if we are authentic in the way that we message. And I think that's the way that you get the people who are just disengaged, in contradistinction to what I described before that, which is the way that you get the people who are suspicious of electoral politics.
Thank you.
And Halima's probably going to have to be the last one for me, just because I'm supposed to do a podcast at the top of the hour.
Absolutely. Yes. Halima, please go.
Okay. Mine might be a challenging question for you. I'm sorry about that, Brand.
I hope it is.
Or maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. So I want to move away from the conversation about the Blue No Matter Who cult members. And one thing that I have done is I haven't studied lately. I have not been obsessed with the Democratic Party, the Blue No Matter Who. I've studied very closely the Republican Party, the rise of the far right. I've been studying different influencers, different tools, different tactics. And one thing that is not discussed enough is, how Trump won the election, right? And I think what it actually is discussed a lot, but it's discussed in a wrong way, I feel like. And the thing that they get very wrong is a lot of youth voted for him. And and the reason being is they had more effective tools. And their biggest tool was something of the creation of Charlie Kirk. And I don't want to make this into a referendum on Charlie Kirk or his, untimely demise. But specifically on the organization of GPWA and what they have built in the last 10 years, 10, 12 years. And yes, they were able to build this organization in like nearly 50 states, in like hundreds and hundreds of college campuses. They have chapters. And yes, big reason is they had billionaire funding, but you can still get the funding and fall flat on your face. And with that funding, they have turned the college campuses, high schools, the youth, into, program their minds into this concept of their ideology around culture wars and, these specific issues they've had and, triggering fear and all this stuff. And so how do we take back the youth, and how do we look at GPWA and say, we have a massive organizing problem, and how did this not be on our radar?
Yeah, I mean, it's a crucial question. It's one of the direct side effects of the Democrats being who they are, frankly, is that they create an environment in which that kind of fascist populist demagoguery has a built-in audience. That has been predicated by the Democrats, the Liberal Party, completely betraying the white working class, selling off, the industry to every corner. It's the neoliberal turn in the Democrats that produced the base that has become the Charlie Kirk base, the Trump base, and so forth. We cannot, especially between now and June, create the equivalent of Turning Point USA. That's not going to happen. What I've been doing is we've now established, I think we're up to close to 20 Campus Greens chapters. And to have those Campus Greens chapters be doing voter registration drives on campuses so that they become visible faces of like political engagement and connection. I've been making the argument, especially as SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine, and other groups have been targeted by this administration, that a lot of the SJP leadership should just join a Campus Greens, and because it's much harder to actually crack down on Campus Greens organizing. It's much better protected than SJP is because they're campus Republicans, campus Democrats, and you can have your Campus Greens. Even if 9 out of 10 of your activities are pro-Palestine activities, it's still going to be much harder for them to shut you down. So as a strategic matter, I perceive the same thing that you did. The most important number that came out of Zoran's electoral campaign for me was that the 18 to 24 demographic was the highest voter turnout in the primary cycle, and that's what I'm trying to replicate, because wherever people are situated on the ideological spectrum in that 18 to 24 demographic, they're now anti-Zionist, even the right-wing ones. And I'm actually the only candidate running that is an anti-Zionist across the board. And so it's one of the principal ways that I actually hope to appeal to a lot of those right-leaning voters. The last thing that I'll say, and this will probably have to be the last thing that I say overall, is that it was actually my experience, and I alluded to this earlier, that it is actually much easier to recruit ordinary Republicans than it is hardcore dyed-in-the-wool blue MAGA type folks. And the way that I learned this lesson was that quite literally on a flight from Santa Barbara to Phoenix, which is like an hour-long flight, I converted a Republican couple who then organized a Green Party rally in their town of Flagstaff, Arizona, on the basis of a 45-minute conversation that we had on a flight. And I'll just give you the basics of it because you can use this and try this out on all of your right-leaning friends. I had to improvise this because they told me that they were voting for RFK, and I said, well, RFK is in with Trump now, and they're like, well, I guess we're going to vote for Trump again. And I said, well, I actually happen to be the Green Party vice presidential candidate. And they were like, what's the Green Party? I said, well, let me make my case. And so here was the case. I said, aren't you tired of the Democrats calling you racist? That's how I opened the conversation. And they said, yeah. And I said, I don't think that your average Trump voter is more racist than your average Democrat. I think that that's a bedtime story that liberals tell themselves so that they can feel good about themselves. Because I don't think, in point of fact, that a liberal white supremacist is any different than a conservative white supremacist. I really do think that that's just the rhetorical structure of the culture war. I've worked in academia long enough to have been living surrounded by liberal white supremacists for my entire career. So it's a hard pill to swallow, but I can say it because it's true. I actually don't, when it comes to interpersonal, think that your average Trump voter is more racist than your average Democrat voter. I said, now I know Trump's racist. He says racist stuff all the time. And Jennifer, the woman, she's like, that's true. He does say crazy stuff. I said, but I still don't think that means your average Trump voter is racist. I said, here's what I think, Jennifer. I said, I think your average Trump voter does not see a difference between blue criminals and red criminals, and all other things being equal would rather pay lower taxes. And she laughed. She said, that's basically it. And then that's when she tapped her husband, Steve, on the shoulder. And she says, tell him what you just told me. So then we have this conversation. And I said, what if I could tell you that I'm going to lower your taxes with one simple step? I'm going to stop reaching into your pockets, taking money out and handing it to weapons manufacturers after first laundering it through forever wars in the Middle East. And they really liked that argument. I continued by basically just making a straightforward anti-war, anti-imperialist argument and saying it's better for us to spend our resources on people here at home than to hand them to weapons manufacturers and never-ending wars in the Middle East. And I can't give you the full version of that conversation, but I can tell you the way that it ended. The way that it ended was with, I still have their numbers. I still have a picture of them on my phone. They organized a rally in Flagstaff, Arizona. And when I was getting off the plane, Steve said to me, wait, we need to take a selfie. You're going to be the first Muslim president in the United States of America. That's what he said. Those were his exact words. So all of that is just to say, I'm not leaving any of those Republican voters as though they are beyond the reach of like a simple populist appeal that says it's better if we spend our resources on healthcare and housing and taking care of Californians than investing in blowing kids up in other countries. It's better if we give tax breaks to ordinary working people rather than billionaires. And that argument has legs with people that think of themselves as conservatives, as long as they don't see you as being rooted in an opposite side of a culture war, right? And in the end, I don't care who you pray, like who you pray with or who you lay with. It makes no difference. Human rights are for human beings, and we're protecting human rights for all human beings, and we're trying to take back power and representative democracy from a corporate elite and give it to everyone. That's it. And that is an easy argument, for a lot of people to. You're never going to get the hardcore Charlie Kirkers any more than you're going to get the hardcore Blue MAGA. But again, we don't need them. We need to get 1.5 million people to hear this message and come out to vote on June 2nd, 2026, because every other domino falls automatically if that first domino falls. Every other domino falls if we get to that mark. I have to go. I'm so sorry, guys.
Dr. Ware, really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for your time and for
really
the
appreciate
inspirational
you guys.
talk.
Thank you for all of the work in Washington. And I look forward to coming up and visiting again in person. I got to meet a lot of y'all during the campaign when I was running with Dr. Jill, and look forward to coming back up sooner than later.
Thank you so much. All right. That was a great talk. I'd love to pivot or move to our next agenda item, which is Green Party Washington member Noah Martin, who has been asking in our coordinating council meeting